able to join the live link have the option of joining or looking at the recording afterwards. As I've mentioned in the chat box to everybody, I have muted your mic, and I've also disabled your video. This just to make sure that nobody accidentally activates a mic or a video. And we get to hear all sorts of strange conversations. I will, once we are done, reactivate your mics, and then you can ask your questions by raising your hands. If there are urgent things that you would like to ask, please use the chat function. So good morning, everybody. Just by a show of hands or a thumbs up or something like that, please indicate if you can hear me, if I'm audible. Okay, awesome, awesome, awesome. I am audible. And then I am going to start the session. So today, I'm super excited about today for the simple reason that it's the first time I'm presenting on this topic. And you will understand shortly why this topic is important. So you have registered for the degree in forensic science and technology. And today we are going to look at a little bit of a different angle in this subject field. We are going to unpack and consider the different types of investigations that one may do within the investigative context in South Africa. For those of you who do not yet know, my name is Bernadine Benson, and I'm your lecturer for this module. Before we go on, I want to remind you all of my contact details. There is my email address, there is my cell number, and there is my landline. My office hours are Monday to Friday from 8 until 4. And you can contact me for tuition matters for the following modules only: FOR1502, which is this module, FOR3701. None of you should be registered for this module if you are also registered for 1502. And I'm also the lecturer for FOR5907. So I cannot help you with queries on other modules. If, however, you have a query, a tuition query for FR3701, and it is for last year, please do contact Dr. Mokoena. I cannot address inquiries from last year. If you need to contact the COD, our chair of department, her email address is there on the screen. And I've also supplied you with the email address of our departmental secretary, Mrs. Manenche. If you need to contact the exam department about the past exams or FI concession exams that have just recently been held regarding marks, please contact Mrs. Chikakisa at the exam department. That is her email address. You are more than welcome to share this information and contact details with other students. I just want to pause quickly and remind you, because I'm getting queries again, and this is concerning me because it means that the students are not reading about what they are supposed to be doing. This module is not intended to prepare you to be able to work in a laboratory. It is only meant to give a foundation for investigative work within either the corporate, the private, or the public sector. Now, this may mean that you could end up working in a pure police environment like the South African Police Service, or even at one of the municipal police divisions that there are in our country, or you could possibly be employed by a place like Eskom or SARS as an in-house investigator, or a private investigative firm, of which there are so many out there. You could even start your own investigative company, thus be a private investigator. But this specific module is only a foundation. Once you have done this module, you will not yet be able to do all of these things. To be able to progress, you will have to get on-the-job training and coaching or mentoring. So please, it's not, the BA Forensic Science and Technology is not a qualification to skill you to work in a forensic laboratory. You will need to do a BSc, a Bachelor of Science, for that. And at this stage, I am not certain whether UNISA offers it. I'm almost certain that UNISA does not offer a BSc. Okay, before we get into the thinking part, let's warm up our brains by answering a few questions. So I want to try something with your permission, and I want to launch a a poll quickly. So let me see if I can launch the poll. Okay, so the first question will be, what is a face but cannot smile? In the chat box, I want you to all try and answer the question. What is a face but cannot smile? So let's give about 10 seconds for that. Okay, everybody done? Let's try the next one. Let's try the next one. Oh, I'm loving the answers that are coming through. Let's take a look at the next one. There is only one word spelled wrong in the dictionary. What is that word? There is only one word spelled wrong in the dictionary. What is that word? Oh, your brains are hot this morning. I'm very pleased to hear that. Okay, and our third one is what goes up but never comes down? What goes up but never comes down? What do you think that is? That's an interesting one, Rain. What goes up but never comes down? Okay, so we have we have our poll. And the answer to the first one, what is a face but can't smile? And those who answered clock is correct. There is only one word spelled wrong in the dictionary. What is it? Yes, the word wrong. The word wrong. If you got that answer, if you wrote wrong, then you got that answer right. And the last one, what goes up but never comes down? Yes, our age, our age. Okay, awesome. So I think our brains have been heated up. So let's continue with our presentation. There were the questions, and thank you for taking part. I believe our brains are warm now. Before we carry on with today's lesson, you might recall that I asked you to bring some tools with you. So I want you to now take out your notebooks and write down the following 3 questions. What do you expect to learn from today's session? What do you expect to learn from the session today? What do you expect? What do we expect to learn from life today? In other words, outside the session, if you take the whole 24 hours of today, what do we expect to learn from life today? And the third question, what do we expect to learn from FOR1502 when we are done with the entire semester? What do we expect to learn from the FOR1502 when we are done with the entire semester? We will come back to these questions when we are done with the session, and we will also touch on them during the course of the semester. The answers to some of these questions we are going to look at today, and I'm going to invite everyone to use the chat box for this. If you're comfortable to share your answers in the chat box, then you, but if you are not comfortable to do so, then you can just write it down for yourself in your study notes or in your notebook. Or if you have a study guide, you can write it on the inside page of the study guide. But I want us to do something with this. I want us to really just take a few moments to think about this. The first question we must ask ourselves, what do we expect to learn from the session? So for the next 2 minutes, just take a moment and think of the lesson today. What are some of the expectations that you have of the lesson today? Please write in the chat box. If you are not comfortable to write in the chat box, write it in your notebook, write it in your study guide. I'm also going to write something in the chat box because I'm included in the question. Remember, if you're not comfortable to write in the chat box, you're more than welcome to just write it in your notebook. Okay, so if we look at the next question, what do we expect to learn from life today? Today. So I've shared with you what I have learned from life. Okay, and our last question. Our last question. The third and last one. What do we expect to learn from FOR 1502 when we are done with the entire semester? We're going to try to measure our progress as we proceed through the semester. You will also note our expectations of each lesson should help us to achieve this one. Do you see in these questions, I'm using the word we. I'm using this purposefully because I'm including myself in the learning process. The fact that I'm the lecturer does not mean that I've stopped learning. And it actually also does not mean that I cannot learn from each of you. I want to learn from each of you. And it's not always necessarily discipline-specific matters, but through your views and opinions and questions, I learn how to improve, and I learn how to do better in my tuition. So for the semester, let me write in there. Okay, so I'm hoping in this semester that I learn how to reach my students in a more effective manner. So there are my comments. Can I just hear, because I see there's no comments in the chat box, are you able to show of hands with a thumbs up? Can you access the chat box? Okay, all right, so you can access the chat box, not a problem, and we can proceed. Today's lesson, what I would like to achieve is that when you leave the lesson today, this is what I want you to have reached. Stephen Covey refers to the 7 habits of highly effective people, and one of these habits is beginning with the end in mind. Where are we headed after we've concluded this session? The session does not cover any specific study unit. Actually, it's like an umbrella presentation. The content will overlap between the different study units. And I'm doing this purposefully because I've noticed from previous semesters that students think that the study units, like the study unit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in section 1 and 1 to 6 in section 2 are mutually exclusive. In other words, you study one and then you finish it and then you put it away. And then you study a second one, you finish it and you put it away. That's not correct. They overlap, and they actually, you need, especially study unit 0, 1, and 2, to understand the rest of the study unit. So today what I want is to be able to walk out and have an understanding of the different types of investigations, whether it's criminal and civil or disciplinary, and why they are done, and also to understand the difference between law and policy. Policy as in company rules and procedures. Those two are very important to understand the difference. You would have read by now that society is governed by rules and laws. If you do not know what the rules are, how can you follow these rules? Therefore, it's vital that you first know the rules before you can follow them. If I want to be able to follow the rules, I must make known to you what they are. I cannot reprimand you for something that I haven't already told you. Listen, you may not do X, Y, and Z, and then in ignorance you do X, Y, and Z, and then I punish you. That's unfair. Having said that, I can also not call you out for doing something that's not contained in the rules. So in other words, today I decide I don't like yellow, you show up at the class wearing yellow, and I reprimand you, but it's not in the rules. So doing that would be unfair of me. But having said that, it's also impossible to have rules and laws for each and every situation in life. As life evolves, so do the rules and laws. Broadly, the rules I refer to here in the context of our study guide is law and policy, company policy. Knowing them will help me to color inside the lines. Rules are more informal than laws, but there are consequences when rules are broken. You can, for example, be charged under the disciplinary code of your company if you do not abide by the rules. But remember, those rules may only apply to employees of the company. It may not apply to your life partner who comes and visits you, or who works for another company, or the Mr. Delivery person entering the premises. Non-compliance with policies of a company will only amount to a disciplinary transgression for the people working in that company. But sometimes contained in these policies and rules is conduct that may also be criminal. Remember, non-compliance with law constitutes a criminal offense, and the laws that we are going to be talking about will be either your common law or your statutory law. Breaking the law does have dire consequences, and you will get in trouble. If you aren't found out on the first time, it's inevitable that you are going to be caught out if you continue to break the law and think you will get away with it. In our module, we're going to discuss two very specific sets of rules, in inverted commas. The first set is called law, and the second set is called policy. I hope that you have read by now in your study guide that South Africa is a constitutional democracy. This means that the Constitution of South Africa is the highest law of the land. In other words, everything, all the laws in South Africa are weighed against the Constitution. If the law or something in the law is found to be contradictory to the Constitution, then it gets challenged and it gets changed. All our laws, every single law in the country has to pass constitutional muster. In other words, it has to be or conform to what our Constitution declares. But this also means that we are bound to adhere to the rule of law, and no person is above the law. Now, what does the rule of law mean? The rule of law is a principle of governance in which all people, institutions, organizations, companies, entities, public or private, you could have a private firm, you have to abide by the rule of law, and this includes the state itself. In other words, government. Everybody and every institution are accountable to the laws that are publicly promulgated, equally enforced, and independently adjudicated, and which are consistent with international human rights norms and standards. So, in other words, our rules and our laws have to also not only meet constitutional requirements, but also international standards. And I mean, we have the International Convention on Human Rights. So there's a higher standard out there, but our Constitution conforms to that. And the four things that our constitutional democracy, can I say, consists of when we talk about the rule of law is that there is accountability. We have just laws. We have an open government. And we have accessible justice. In other words, the justice is accessible to everybody. For the purpose of our discussion today, the law I'm referring to will either be common law or statutory law. I briefly talk about customary law in the study guide, but in this module, we do not address customary law. So it is not relevant in terms of our discussion. Does not mean that it doesn't apply in South Africa. Customary law applies in South Africa, just not in the context of our discussion today. Having said that, law in South Africa means that it is applicable to all South Africans. So it doesn't matter where you live in South Africa, the law, common law and statutory law, applies to all of us. Company policy. Company policy is the second set of rules we are going to be talking about. And companies set rules in place, and this tells the employee how they should and should not act. And the employer is actually expected to put something like that in place, so that when I start working for a company, like when I started working for UNISA, I signed an employment contract with them. And as part of my employment contract, I was read into the different policies. For example, the policy on employee misconduct. I was made aware of what conduct and UNISA considers unacceptable, and therefore they deem this as misconduct. And there are other policies as well. For example, the ICT policy, how I'm supposed to use my laptop, my work laptop. For example, the policy on remuneration, the policy on vacation leave. All of those policies are applicable to me while I'm working for UNISA. But all of these policies, when they are drafted aligned with law. So our Labour Relations Act, Act 66 of 1995, which is a statutory law, frames how the labor market is to engage, how the employer and the employee are to communicate, how to interact, and how they are to do what they do. Companies should design policies so that everybody knows what's acceptable behavior and what's considered misconduct. All policy designed to set standards for a company must adhere to that which is legally binding in our laws. Thus, while some policies are not directly linked to legislation, others are, such as the Employment Equity Act that frames the recruitment and appointment of people within the company. So if I resign from UNISA and I go and I work for, let's say, University of Johannesburg, I will be asked to sign an employment contract, and there will be a different set of policies, probably very much the same in terms of content, but the wording may be different here and there. Thus, company policy stops having an impact on me as an individual once I leave the company who I had the employment contract with. The contract that the company lets me sign should make this clear. What is expected of me and what's not expected of me. So laws on the one side, applicable to everybody, everywhere in South Africa. Labor relations, company policy, applicable only to the people employed in a company at that time based on your employment contract. And when you leave the company and sign with another company, you will get another contract, and then obviously they will also then brief you on their policies. When you hear the term justice, because everything we do in terms of investigative, everything we do in life, there should be an element of justice, that what we do is just, it's right. When you hear the term justice, what comes to mind? Study Unit 0 spoke a little bit about pre-colonial Africa. And in this study unit, we focused on things that are necessary for us to start focusing on. We've also tried to ensure that the Western paradigm, that very Western way of thinking in our learning material, is removed. No, not removed. Is moved a little bit to the side. But we've also tried to ensure that we situate this module and our other learning material also into more African epistemology. What does that mean? Well, what I mean by this is that if you thought that the Europeans brought justice and order to Africa, you would be wrong. There's a lot of research out there that says, oh no, when the pioneers or when Van Riebeeck or whoever came to the Cape, Africa was lawless and people were running around killing each other. That's nonsense. That's utter nonsense. There is evidence of the existence of social order and groups or components within tribes and ethnic groups and regions that were established to maintain order and also to address situations when there was disorder. There is research on this. Unfortunately, the research is not always put at the forefront of the arguments because sometimes these arguments are uncomfortable for people to have. So knowing that justice and order is not a Western concept, that is our starting point in this module. So in study unit 0, we briefly look at social justice, we look at alternative dispute resolution, and we look at restorative justice, as well as the African philosophy of Ubuntu. Now, I know this is not a political philosophy module, but these principles are vital as we work through the learning material and are encouraged to consider and discuss alternative avenues of justice, of meting out justice in a specific situation to those options at our disposal of discipline or harsh legislative measures. Who knows? We might even end up changing things in our respective spaces because of what we've learned by just asking, but isn't there a better way or another way of doing what we are doing? So now that we have a little bit more of a foundational understanding of the lens from which we are looking at this module, let's quickly just look at the different study units. So there are 2 separate sections in the study guide, and there are 13 different study units. Study unit 0 is like the umbrella study unit. It is the lens that I want you to use to look at the other remaining study units. Section 1 deals specifically with disciplinary a background on what a disciplinary offense is or misconduct, and we deal with 4 different types of disciplinary offenses. Section 2, we deal with criminal offenses, and there are 6 different units. So let's proceed and look at coloring inside the lines, which basically means we stay within the boundaries we set. From this image, you can see that there are different shades of yellow and pink and blue and green right in the top. But in the bottom, the lines are blurred and you can't really see where the one starts and the other one ends. So it is fluid. But how does this now relate to our lessons? Since society is governed by rules and laws, it means that members of society are expected to conduct themselves in a specific way. Government put in place laws that tell us what to do, and companies put in policy and explains what is expected and not expected. There are also principles that feed through both section 1 and section 2. And these principles form the golden thread. That's why I said I want to encourage you not to look at the different study units in isolation, but to view them and the principles that run through them. We will be looking at these principles when we use them during investigation, whether it's criminal or civil/disciplinary investigations. So there are 3 broad categories of investigations. Criminal investigations, that's when we investigate something that's a crime. In other words, it's in either the common law or it's in one of the statutory laws. Then civil or disciplinary investigations. And then there are investigations for information only. Which one of these is eventually embarked on will depend on what is it that needs to be done, or what do we want to prove. This is an important question to ask because the quality and standards for evidence in the two categories are different. Let us consider these categories relevant to this module only. So the first one is a criminal investigation. If a crime has been committed, like an existing law has been broken, somebody has stolen a computer, broken into a car and stolen a laptop bag out of the car, somebody has murdered another person, somebody has committed corruption or fraud, that means an existing law has been broken. Then a criminal investigation is done because we want to find the truth and arrest the perpetrator so that that person can have their day in court to answer the allegations set against them. Successful prosecution of the offender is what we want to achieve at the end of the day. So criminal offences are traditionally reported to the police, who must then do a comprehensive investigation into the matter. They don't have a choice. They are legally obligated to investigate every crime reported to them in a comprehensive manner. They are obliged by law. But for many years now, there have been other role players who have also started to do criminal investigations. And it's vital to note that criminal offences are not only investigated by SAPS. There's quite a number of government agencies who conduct their own criminal investigations. But these are mandated by specific pieces of legislation, and then that government agency may only work within that framework. For example, the Special Investigations Units, they may only do the investigations given to them that fall within a specific mandate. The military police may only do specific investigations when it's on their property or their people are involved. I'm sure you've watched NCIS, very similar to what the military police do. And even the environmental management inspectors, these are what they call the green scorpions. They investigate offences against biodiversity, in other words, plant life, animal life. What is the other word? When people spill toxic chemicals, they do environmental impact assessments. So, but they only work within a specific set of legislation, and it's important to note that, for example, several of the EMIs, when you go from province to province, the provincial legislation differs from province to province. So it's not applicable, the same legislation necessarily. In terms of the provinces, the provincial legislation differs province to province. In addition, there's several audit firms and many investigative companies or agencies that offer their services to conduct criminal investigations, and then they provide a completed investigation to the SAPS or for prosecution, or even just to the company that hired them. Often this is where either a private or a forensic investigator may be contracted with a mandate to conduct just a specific investigation. You look at this, you look at the conduct of person A and person A only, nothing else. These investigations do not necessarily end up being prosecuted as a criminal matter. Some companies just use the report, the evidence gathered, to do a disciplinary hearing, or they even go to civil court with this type of evidence. But if you are preparing or if you are doing an investigation and your tribunal, where you are going to end up or should end up, is in a court of law, as in a criminal offense, you go to either a magistrate court, a regional court, or a high court, depending on what the offense type is. Your standard of proof is beyond reasonable doubt. So that is the standard of proof that you must provide. And also the onus, the burden of proof, on whose shoulders is the burden to prove. In other words, who is responsible to prove that person A stole a laptop? The one who makes the allegation. So if you are a corporate investigator and you are working for your company and there is an allegation of, let's say, an assault in the workplace, which is a criminal matter, and your company wants you to do a full forensic investigation, that they want to open a criminal case, remember, the victim in a company always has the right to say, I'm taking this to the police. Always. The company cannot stop them. I've never heard of a company having the power to say, you know what, you've been assaulted or your personal laptop has been stolen. You may not go and report it to the police. We have to handle it in-house. I've never heard of something like that. But what I want to say is that the burden to prove an allegation is always on the one who is making the allegation. So if the company is making the allegation that person A defrauded the company of so much money, company A has to prove the allegation beyond reasonable doubt if they are going to a criminal, going towards a criminal hearing. However, if there's a rule of a company that has been transgressed or not complied with, then usually a disciplinary investigation or an investigation into the misconduct is done to determine, does it culminate in a disciplinary hearing or not. So similarly, an investigation is done to find the truth so a decision can be made, depending on the policy guidelines of the company. Remember, not all disciplinary offenses should be investigated. Some transgressions are minor and should not be investigated. It's a waste of resources. But the company policy will frame what is considered as minor or less serious, what is considered as serious, and what's considered as very serious misconduct. The Labor Relations Act does give a framework to help companies do that. For such investigations, most companies have in-house investigators. They are called by various names. They are called forensic investigators. They are called corporate investigators. They are called risk managers, whatever the case might be. Companies who do not have their own in-house investigative capacity usually outsource these investigations to private companies who specialize in this type of investigation, or even to private detectives. The standard of evidence for this type of forum, for example, if it's a disciplinary inquiry into the alleged misconduct of a person, and it's probably going to end up in a disciplinary hearing, then the standard of evidence is on a balance of probability. So in other words, how probable is the version given by person A versus the version given by person B. So in other words, how probable is it that person A did in fact defraud the company of the money? Thus, this is a lower standard of evidence than is required in a criminal case. It's also important to note that when you go to a civil court, so in other words, let's say I am your neighbor and you call me horrible names every second day, and to such an extent you are starting to post this on social media, and you are defaming my name, you're defaming my reputation, and my company is taking a hit, and people are withdrawing contracts because of this. I can take you to civil court. I can make a case against you in a civil court, because a civil court is almost a better forum for me to get what I want, because I want you to retract, and if I go the criminal route, you won't necessarily be forced to retract, and I won't necessarily get what I want out of the prosecution. But what if a company wants to hire a specific person, but they first want to find out more about that person? Then they can task or hire an investigator to compile either an intelligence profile or a background check. Now, this is the third type of investigation that I spoke about in the beginning, but we won't be talking about it here. When you get to FOR 2607 and FOR 2608, this is where you will learn more about intelligence profiles and background checks. But for now, we will only be looking at criminal investigations and civil or disciplinary type investigations. So the last category, I just want to unpack it a little bit, is aimed at gathering information or intelligence on somebody. So your company wants to hire, let's say, a specific person, and they want to find out a little bit more about this person. Then they usually hire an investigator to compile a background check or an intelligence profile. And more often than not, this includes, you don't even know this is being done on you. So confidentiality is very important in especially this space. Not that it's not important in the other spaces, but here especially as well. So let's recap quickly. We've dealt with criminal investigations. These are done by the SAPs and other investigators. You may only investigate something that has already been declared a criminal offense in law, and the standard of proof is beyond reasonable doubt. Then we deal with forensic or civil disciplinary investigations. These are framed by either company policy, policy usually on misconduct, and it's usually done by your corporate investigator, your in-house investigator, your risk manager, or a private forensic investigator. And the standard of proof is on a balance of probabilities. Okay, let's pause here quickly. Let's go back to where we started to see where it is we wanted to end up, and ask yourself now, how well do you now understand the different types of investigation? In other words, your criminal and your civil or disciplinary investigation, and why they are done. In other words, what is it that we want to prove? Then, how well do you also then understand the difference between law, as in common law, and statutory law, and policy, our company rules and our procedures? Let's think on that for a moment. And let's ask ourselves, is there something that we're still a little bit unclear about? And then just make a mental note or jot it down so that we can chat about it when we're done. Okay, so everybody, I'm assuming, has jotted down their thoughts in terms of what we set out to achieve in this lesson and what we've achieved. So we're almost at the end of our session, but what I want you to bear in mind, and I took this from Pinterest, more often than not, when people do things, they say, oh, it was a mistake. No? Now, if you make a mistake once, it's a mistake. Yeah, anybody can make a mistake. Making that same mistake is a second time is a decision. So put that in the back of your head and remember it for your own life, my own life, but also going forward in investigation. So if there's a person that repeatedly makes the same mistake, then it's a decision. That decision might not necessarily be a cognitive decision to with intention, break the rules. There might be something else at play. And we will talk about that during our next session when we deal with the different types of misconduct. Okay, so let's take a look at questions. Okay, any questions in the chat box? I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box. I'm going to invite you all to raise your hands. I'm going to change the settings so that you can unmute your mics. Let me just allow mics. Okay. Okay, you should all now be able to unmute yourself. So I'm going to ask that if there are questions and you want to raise your hand, I will take the first 3 hands. Or you can write in the chat box if you have something that you want to ask me. Are there any hands? Are there no hands? Any chats? Anything in the chat box? Okay. Nothing in the chat box. Okay. If there's nothing in the chat box, I'm not going to ask questions again. I'm not going to belabor the point. I'm going to put here, this is a survey that I would like you to complete for me while we're in the class. Just a couple of questions about today's class. And any feedback you can give me, I will really appreciate it because it helps then that I can improve how I do what I do. So I want you to invite you quickly to, while we're sitting in the class and waiting to just wrap up, then you could just quickly give me some feedback on today's class, please. Yeah, it's not long. It's let me see how many questions. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 questions. Basically just asking your view and your opinion on today's class, please. So while you are hopefully taking the quiz, I'm going to prepare the slideshow and I'm going to share it here for everybody. So you're going to have a bit of silence. I'm going to give another minute or so before I close the session. So while some of you are still preparing or submitting your responses, I just want to remind you that assignment 1, which is an online MCQ open today, I want you to please go and do the assignment. It's an online quiz. It's multiple choice, true and false, match columns, and fill in the missing words. And you will have 2 opportunities to do the quiz, and the highest mark will count. And then once the due date is passed, you can go and look at your results, and then you can go and see which areas or aspects of the work you did not fully understand and that you might need to revisit. So please remind your fellow students that the assignment is going to open. Okay, there were 9 people in the class. There are 5 responses. Responding is not compulsory. It just helps me to understand that how I'm doing what I'm doing, and to try and improve so that I meet your expectations. Because remember, I design the PowerPoint presentation in terms of how I think that would help you to understand. You are more than welcome then to access the recording afterwards, to go over the recording again, and to then look at the recording again. If there's something that you don't understand or something that you are unfamiliar with, you are more than welcome to do that. You can then pop me an email if there's something that you want to clarify or something that you're not 100% certain on. But just remember to please, in the subject line, tell me which module it is that you are asking about. I'm just looking for the PowerPoint now of our session, so that I can share it with you. Okay, it's not that one. It's this one, I think. Yes, it's this one. Okay, so I'm going to close it, and then so I can share it with you. I will also post it on the module site so that you can access it from there. We were a very quiet group today. You made me very nervous because I wasn't sure whether you were still all in the session, but from the sounds of it, you are all sorted. And there we go. There is the PowerPoint presentation of the session this morning. And once we're done and I close off, I will then share the link. Yes, so everybody have an awesome day further, and we will chat again. Check your emails for when our next session is going to be held. Have a good day.